Hello, ladies and gentlemen, it's Ulan Gaming, and I'm here with our next civilization overview. This one is for Japan. Now, Japan, overall, is one of the civilizations that just kind of has everything going for it. It's overall an extremely solid pick that it excels in pretty much anything it tries to do and has no overarching weaknesses. It is what every civ aspires to be, essentially. First we can see, let's go into Japan. First we see their flag. This is a terrible rendition that I lazily made in about 3 seconds and used for all my tier list videos. So just ignore that. But now we go into the unique mechanics right below it. You can see the four that Japan, like all the Asian civs, have lots of unique mechanics, but the four I wanted to talk about are the shrines, the daimyos and shoguns, the consulates, and the fact that they cannot gather hunts. So Japan, instead of building houses, they build shrines. These shrines get placed all over the map and generate resources like tiny little factories, and they generate all of the shrines will generate one type of resource. You can set them all to gather food, all to gather wood, all to gather coin, or XP after you send a card. But they gather more food and coin and wood based off how many animals and how many animals are gathering from the shrines. And while an animal is gathering from the shrine, it cannot be hunted by your opponent. So what a lot of Japan players will do is they will go to the other side of the map and cover all of the opponent's hunts in shrines so that they cannot actually get any food until they get military out and siege down your shrines. Their other unique mechanic revolves around the Daimyo and Shogun. India and Japan both have mechanics based around giving auras to their military. The Japan answer is the Daimyo and Shogun, which are special heavy cavalry units that provide auras to units around them, can train units, and can receive shipments from their home city. These units are very, very powerful and are very important to the Japanese military. Just like all of the Asian civilizations, they also have their consulate. Japan does. The consulate for Japan is also rather important because they get one of their bonus benefits that they can get from the consulate is an attack aura increase. But we'll get into the consulate a little bit more later, I think, maybe. And the last thing about Japan is that they cannot gather food from hunts. They can only gather food from berries or farms. And all of the market upgrades that would upgrade hunting now upgrade berry gathering instead. And this is to counter the shrines which generate resources. Japan always starts with 1 to 2 cherry rickshaws, depending on how many berry bushes you start out in your base. So the general playstyle of Japan is going to be the boom. A lot of Japan players don't tend to all-in rush, but they tend to sit back and gather their eco and build a huge military, and have a huge military presence throughout the whole game from beginning to ends. The Japanese economy is very strong, and their units are very strong, and so the general Japanese playstyle is to lean heavily into both of these, and kind of just age up whenever they feel like it. As for their age-up system, like all of the Asian civilizations, they have wonders, which are massive buildings constructed by your settlers that provide unique benefits but lose the benefit as soon as the building is destroyed. Therefore, if you are facing a Japanese player, or you are a Japanese player, it's very important that you focus on the wonders. If you are the Japanese player, you want to defend your wonders and keep them in the back line, and if you are fighting a Japanese player, you want something with high siege so that you can take down wonders. Because destroying wonders will severely cripple any Asian player's playstyle. Hero unit is the Sohei Archer. Japan is one of 2 civilizations that gets 2 explorers. The Sohei Archers have the ability to stun targets for a good chunk of time, and they also have a chance to critical strike on their attacks, which do double damage. They can absolutely be treasure hunting gods, but they do require a little bit of RNG. The Sohei Archers also have the ability to smoke bomb back to the Japan player's shipment point, as well as, after various card upgrades, go into stealth, provide negative buffs to enemy units, as well as siege down buildings very quickly using their sabotage ability. The Sohei archers can be useful throughout the entire game if you want them to be and you invest in them. If you don't, it's perfectly fine because everything else Japan has is very strong anyways. Looking at their unique units, I didn't put the Consulate units in here, nor did I put the Shogun and Daimyo, which I want to talk about separately, but pretty much all of Japan's unit roster is completely unique to them. They have flaming arrows, which serve the purpose of both the falconet and the culverin for Japan, in that it counters infantry units as well as buildings and other artillery. They're not great against buildings, mind you, but they do their job. And then the Moritaru is basically just a mortar. And there's nothing particularly special or outstanding about the Moritaru other than that it's a mortar. The Naginata Rider, the Ashigaru Musketeer, and the Yumi Archer I have in a red square. And this is something I will do consistently from now on, is to put the units that I think are best for the civilization in red squares, so that we can give new players specific units that they want to focus on when they are learning their new civilization. Naginata Riders are an incredible heavy cavalry unit that has a very decent attack, not quite as high as a Hussar, but they have a multiplier against infantry, so they're very, very good at taking down skirmishers and archers and all of that jazz. The Ashigaru Musketeer is a musketeer-type unit, so it counters cavalry in melee, and it is highly regarded as one of, if not the best musketeer unit in the game, specifically because it starts with a base movement speed of 4.5, the fastest of any musketeer type in the entire game. They are more expensive, and they also have higher base stats in terms of attack and damage compared to a normal musketeer. They are also more expensive than the musketeer, but it generally doesn't set Japan back too much just because of how powerful their economy is in general. The Yumi Archer is likewise one of the best skirmishers in the game. So we have one civilization here which has some of the best musketeer, skirmisher, and heavy cavalry in the entire game, all in one go. The Yumi Archer is an archer-type unit, of course. It fulfills the role of a skirmisher in that it counters heavy infantry like musketeers or Ashigaru or samurai and stuff like that. The Yumi Archer has an extremely good animation in that even though it is an archer, it fires 3 seconds and fires at the beginning of its animation much like a rifle infantry would, like a skirmisher or a musketeer. And because of this, and they also have just very high damage output that is very highly upgradable throughout the whole course of the game through the use of all of the buffs that Japan has at their disposal. The Yumi Archer can be an absolute death machine once they get massed. The other two Japanese units that you'll see them focus a lot less on are the Samurai, which is a heavy infantry unit that counters cavalry from melee, and the Yabasume Archer, which is a cavalry archer that counters other hand cavalry. The Samurai is good. It is a very solid high damage unit. Generally, people you will not see the Samurai as often as the Ashigaru Musketeer, just because the Ashigaru Musketeer kind of outclasses the Samurai. If somebody masses 5 Samurai, which takes the same population as 10 Ashigaru, and then pits them against 10 Ashigaru, the Ashigaru will win out every single time. As for the Yabasume is one of the only Japan units that is not available until age 3. It's locked with the artillery. And the Yabasume is a good cavalry archer. It's better than the normal cavalry archers, but it's not great until you start really getting its upgrades and rolling them in, and you get to the late game where micro isn't as important as stand and fire. The Yabasume also counters artillery very, very well. Now, when we look at primary unit compositions, I basically just put Ashigaru, Yumi, Naginata, the 3 best units that Japan has access to, because Japan doesn't really have a famous quote-unquote military unit composition, because all of their units are high quality enough that they don't need to rely on any one given unit archetype. They can kind of just make whatever they want for the situation that they need it for. If you're a civilization that focuses on, a lot on musketeers, they'll make lots of Naginata and Yumi. If skirmishers, they'll focus lots on Naginata and Yumi. If you're a civilization that focuses more on cavalry, they'll probably make more Ashigaru. They're very flexible in their military, in that they can just kind of do whatever the hell they want. That's what I put on the right side, is can do whatever the fuck it wants to do and it will still work. That's the ultimate thing here, is Japan can make any unit of theirs and still win with it. Because of how high quality their units are. As long as they pick the right unit for the job, they will turn out okay and always have a threatening military. Japan is a very difficult civilization to counter because of this, and you do need to be rather careful and clever when fighting a good Japanese player. As for things to watch out for, this is where we're finally going to talk about the Daimyos and Shogun. So the Daimyos and Shogun, as I said, they provide auras and buffs to the rest of the military units. They are heavy cavalry types. They do have very high stats, but you don't want them in combat because they are a pain in the ass to get back once they are lost. And the aura that they provide is much more valuable than the damage they provide in an actual battle. So the Daimyos will increase the damage of all of your units by 10%, and the Shogun will increase the HP of all of your units by 10%, as long as those units are near the Daimyo and Shogun. Additionally, the Daimyos can train military units that are cavalry and infantry, and the Shogun can train artillery. This is especially important because it means that they can train units on the go. They can also receive shipments, which means that your Japan player could ship, say, 4 flaming arrows and have those flaming arrows arrive directly on the battlefield at their Shogun, right at the critical moments. Japan is very powerful for this. It is one of the reasons that Daimyos and Shoguns are so powerful and have constantly been asked for nerfs ever since they got created. The Daimyos and Shoguns are admittedly just completely busted in every regard. However, it does also make them prime targets. If you are fighting a Japanese player, then you must prioritize finding the Shogun and killing it. And if you are a Japanese player, you absolutely must prioritize keeping your Shogun or Daimyo alive at any cost to your military. One of the ways that you can do this as a Japanese player is by putting your Daimyos and Shoguns into stand your ground mode. This will prevent your Daimyo and Shogun from charging units as soon as they come within view, and always keep him on the back lines without ever moving unless you order him to. Next is the Japanese wonders. Japan has extremely powerful military-based wonders for the most part. They have one, and it is also extremely important that you scout your opponent's base if you're fighting a Japan player to figure out exactly which wonder they are aging up with to each age. If you spot that they are going with the Toshigu Shrine, then you do need to keep in mind that you need to be aggressive, because that Japan player is going to boom, and if you don't stop his boom and siege down enough shrines, then then you're going to fall behind. But they also have things like the Torii Gates, which boost XP gain from all of the Japan units. They also have the Summer Palace, which is an aura creator, just like the Shoguns and the Daimyos. And the aura it can create at any given time can change depending on what the Japan player wants, and can include anything from melee and range attack to hit points or even movement speed. So your Japan player could set their Summer Palace to movement speed to quickly move their military across the map, and then switch it to attack damage or HP right before the fight starts, making Japan once again an extremely powerful military civilization with no inherent weaknesses to any of their units. those would probably be the ones that I would watch out for the most. Are the Toshigu Shrine, the Summer Palace, and the Torii Gates. And it's always important that if you suspect your Japan player is aging up, that you figure out which one they are going up with ASAP. Now to talk about the unique consulate improvements of Japan. Japan has a specific consulate improvement called Japanese Isolationism, which enable them to have several very unique upgrades, one of which is the ability to batch train in batches of 10 instead of 5, so they can make 10 Naginata at once, or 10 Ashigaru, or 10 Yumi Archers, which is particularly impactful when you keep in mind things like Shoguns and Daimyos, which can in fact train on the battlefield in the middle of a fight, but it's only one pop. Well, that pop will be twice as powerful now because they can train in batches of 10. A very, very valuable consulate ability. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I think it does also increase train times across the board as a penalty, but it's still very worth it. But Japan also has extremely unique consulate units in exchange with their Japanese isolationism, and these units you need to watch out for. They include things like Hatamoto Samurai, which are basically super samurai that will two-shot most units they come in contact with. They are very expensive though, and if you spot any weird, unique Japanese units that are not in that unique unit list above, then the opponent is using Japanese isolationism, which is extremely important for you to keep in mind, because the Japanese isolationism consulate provides a 7% damage boost to all of Japan's military. So then when you think about what I just said, you realize that Japan has an incredibly high amount of auras and boostables to all of their military, which are already strong to begin with. They can get 10% attack and hit points from the Daimyo and Shogun, 10 to 12% of whatever the fuck they want using the Summer Palace. Or sorry, not the Summer Palace, the Golden Pavilion. I don't know why I said Summer Palace. And then 7% more to all their units' damage. So when you combine all that together, you're looking at an Ashigaru, which might have its veterancy upgrades, and then and then its current stats and values have plus 27% to the attack and plus 10% to the hit points. And because these are aura buffs and not unit stat buffs, it means that they scale off the unit's current stats instead of their base stats, meaning that these units can absolutely skyrocket in damage as they go further into the game, and these units already start out extremely strong. So having high siege and having good anti-cavalry to chase down the Shogun and Daimyo to limit the number of auras that Japan has access to is extremely paramount when you are fighting a Japan player. And at the bottom I put Daimyo and Shogun again, because this is really just something that you will always need to keep in mind. Japan players love to use the Daimyos and Shoguns, and for good reason, because they are incredible units. And you need to be absolutely certain that if you have a Daimyo somewhere within view, that you try to kill it, because if not, then it will screw you over. You will find Japan players who stick Daimyos behind your base in the very back along the edge of the map and just train Moritaru or Samurai or Flaming Arrows right in the back of your base and just start sieging everything before you realize it's there, and then by the time you realize there's too many enemies in your base and it's too late to do anything about it. So at all times you must watch for Shoguns. Check the back of your base, make sure you have watchtowers up, just make sure, absolutely certain, that those Daimyos are accounted for. And similarly, when you take one down, if you take down a Shogun, it's permanent and they're never getting it back. But if you take down a Daimyo, they can retrain it with the Shogunate if they aged up with that wonder. But the Daimyos take a very long time to train, so if you take down a Daimyo, then you have a very limited window where the enemy lost an aura that they cannot get back, and that is going to be the time that you want to start pushing into their base. So with that all out of the way, thank you very much for coming to my TED Talk about Japan, and I hope to see you guys next time.